Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. This is a continuation of our first episode on pornography, and today we'll be talking about the solution. The last time we were able to cover the causes, the triggers in the environment, and every other consequence that have to do with pornography and all that, including, but not limited to, individual consequences. But today we'll be focusing on solution. And like I've always said, this is strictly for those who are struggling, who want to get out of this, who feel shame and want to improve their life, who don't want to be bound by the impact of pornography and its consumption. And as usual, I'll be discussing today's topic with Simeon Peters.
Yeah. The last time while we're here, there's just a lot that we said about pornography, its impact, its effect, and how especially teenagers, get hooked on this very form of addiction. But we will be looking at focusing on the solutions,
Yes.
right? The solutions, because a lot of times unfortunately we live in a world where the problems about several things are more announced or more pronounced than the solution.
Yes.
Do you understand? And we know that a lot of people have been looking for solutions.
Yeah.
And like we said last time, the things about addiction
Mm.
are things you cannot do on your own,
Yeah.
right? You're hooked. So you need to hear the solutions that we are proposing
Mm.
today. Most of it has been tested,
Yeah.
if not all of it,
Mm.
right? It's not one of those things you find on YouTube where people are just, trying to say things just for the likes. This is real solutions,
Yeah.
because we're talking about real problems.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my friend Uchi here, he has done, we've known for a long time. We've been exposed to most of the things that our generations are literally facing. And by God's help, we've been able to also overcome, and we're still overcoming, we're still on the journey of growth,
Yeah.
right? So we are glad that we know that the solutions that we're proposing today
Yeah.
will have an amazing impact in your life if you would apply, because it all boils down to application,
Mm.
right? So solutions.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's important to understand that one of the reasons why pornography is not spoken about that much amongst young people, or the older ones don't talk about it much, is because they understand the impact, they understand the dangers, but very few people have a solution to it.
Yeah.
Why? Because we live in a generation where we have people who are still struggling with pornography.
Yeah.
Even at old age, even in marriage,
Mm.
there are people who still struggle with these things. They don't know how to stop.
Yeah.
And here's something really important. If you haven't really overcome a sin, it's difficult for you to teach about it,
Yeah.
except if what you teach is the truth.
Mm.
It's difficult. Yes, you're qualified to teach a sin if you teach the truth.
Yeah.
But if you're only qualified to teach about a sin if you have overcome it, or if you're teaching the truth.
Yeah.
So the concept we'll be discussing today is coming from a place of past struggles and overcoming the difficulty that is associated with this.
Yeah.
So now, discussing the solution with pornography, it's important that if you're struggling with pornography, you understand the various stages that are involved as far as any form of addiction is concerned. And then you also understand the impact, or rather the various aspects of you that this affects.
Mm.
Because what most people do is they think that pornography is just something that affects one aspect of their being.
Yeah.
But as a matter of fact, it affects 5 different aspects, especially when it has become an addiction.
Mm.
Now, before talking about those 5 different aspects, just talking about the various stages of addiction when it has to do with pornography. The first stage has to do with environmental cues. Now, these environmental cues come from those 4 different elements of exposure. For instance,
Now, before we go ahead to talk about the different cues
Mm.
and all the whole solutions, right? We need to make this. First of all, you need to realize that these things are not complex, right? These things are not complex, and we will not try to play down on the kind of whole, because we're aware, like we probably have said in the last episode, that porn addiction, like masturbation as well, is one of the hardest addictions to break.
Mm.
Do you understand? Yes. But these things are not complex. They're not even complicated, right? And we also need to simplify this as possible.
Mm.
So when we talk about cues, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Yeah, environmental cues. Now, the environmental cues talks about those various aspects of exposure that is being extracted by your physical senses. For instance, your eyes, your ears, and every other sense that can assimilate sexual exposure. Like I mentioned in the first episode, that pornography are not just the things are not just videos.
Yeah.
Pornography could be music, it could be literature, like erotic literatures. It could be pictures, it could be videos, even if the most popular form of it is videos. So environmental cues talks about each and any of these aspects that can create a sexual trigger. That's what environmental cue is. And this is the first stage of pornography addiction.
So when we talk about cues, what are we talking about? Patterns?
Patterns.
Is the other word?
Yes, the other word could be patterns. The exposure that accumulates to lead to the second stage. So it means if you're exposed to just one of this, that is maybe you listen to a song that have pornographic content that is directed to cause sexual stimulation, it might not really lead to the excessive consumption of pornography or the addiction of it, or other behavioral patterns that cause harm to individual, except if it cues up. That is, if you expose yourself to something else. Maybe now you listen to a song, now you see a picture that expresses nudity, and then you watch something else, and then eventually you watch pornography.
So now, talking about the connection with what you see,
yes,
what you hear,
yes,
what you feel,
yes, what you see as well,
and what you see. So the accumulation,
yes,
of these different cues
is the first stage of addiction.
The first stage of addiction.
Yes.
Now it's important that you pay attention to what is saying, because a lot of times we undermine the things we see.
Yeah.
We undermine the things we hear. We undermine the things we see.
Yeah.
We undermine the things we feel.
Yeah.
Right. And of course we live in a time where whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
The social media, the internet, your environment has a way of putting these things in front of you all the time, right? But you can still control because that's why you called it environmental cues,
yes,
right? So can you also explain what you mean by environmental cues?
Yeah, every single individual that exists in any dispensation, be it in this physical reality, be it even if you can't see sounds, you know sounds exist.
Yeah.
Even if you can't feel colors, you know colors exist because you can see it. Even if you can't see the things in your mind, you know that they exist because you can think it.
Yeah.
So any place where an existence is exhumed, an environment is created, and you can create a cue in that environment. So by the time a young man or woman consumes pornography as an explicit content that houses sexuality, intense sexuality, nudity, and all that, cues have been created. Other kinds of cues. Maybe it's cues in music, in sound as sounds, or thought patterns that were created by something else, a different kind of exposure. But it's usually at the end leads to the consumption of that explicit content. It's not just when you watch nude people performing sexual activities that it just happened. A cue was created from consuming music, consuming literature, seeing something, hanging out with people that just causes, like I keep saying, anything that its intention is to cause sexual stimulation is pornography. Anything at all.
The key word that we need to look at here is environment.
Environment.
Right, environment. And part of what you're also saying is that we, no matter how little, can control our environment.
Yes. It's part of the solutions we'll be discussing.
Because it's so important that we all understand it, because the other key word is accumulation.
Yes.
Accumulation. Exposing yourself to the things you watch.
Yeah.
Exposing yourself to the things
you listen to.
Yes. Exposing yourself to the things you see, the things you read.
Yes.
And this makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because it connects to what we said in the last episode, right? That porn is not just virtual, right? It's in literature, erotic literatures. It is in a picture format, right? And then so it means that the more you keep on exposing yourself to these various channels, the accumulation of it is what leads you into this addiction.
Yes, to the consumption of the explicit content that leads to behaviors like masturbation, isolation, depression, and all that.
Do people know when they become addicted?
Yes, they know.
Is it just because of the consistency?
It's when they can't stop.
When they can't stop.
And it's causing them harm.
But the exposure of these accumulations the accumulation of these cues is what eventually leads to the consistency of the action, which eventually leads to the addiction.
Yes.
When they can't stop anymore.
Yes, but most times they can't even tell when this these cues are being accumulated in their environment. Most times they can't tell. And it's important that if you're fighting addiction, especially pornography addiction, that you pay attention to this, because it's going to get worse. Because with the outbreak of artificial intelligence and virtual reality, it gets to a point where you will be literally allowed to design your ideal sexual fantasy and interact with it. It's going to get super worse. But yes, the first stage is the environmental cue. The second stage have to do with resistance.
Yeah.
These are the 4 stages of addiction, especially pornography addiction. Environmental cues, resistance, then a corresponding action, and then a reward.
Yeah. So let's talk about the resistance.
Resistance. Yes. Now, after environmental cue, the cues in your environment, your environment have accumulated.
Yeah.
The next stage is that you start resisting. Now, resistance is, like I say, that this is for people who want to stop. There are people who have already accepted that there is nothing wrong with this, or people who don't know what to do about it. But if you want to stop, you see yourself fighting and resisting.
Yeah.
You hate the act, you hate the action, you hate that aftermath experiences brings. So you resist every single thing that have to do with ending up with the action that's like masturbation and all of them. You would fight to resist. But here's the thing: as long as you resist something, you are interacting with it. You need to interact with something to resist it. It's like you're in a fight with something and you're trying to push it out, but it's something that is contaminating your being with it. So by pushing it away, you're still putting your hands in it, and you're still interacting with it. You're still in the experience. So resistance is actually the second stage of it. What that means is, if you find yourself maybe in your room alone or isolated, and you're resisting the urge to consume porn, you're already at the second stage. Like you're already in it, not even the first stage, you're already at the second stage. Well, because as far as addiction is concerned, and when talking about the solution, you find out that it is way more easier to avoid addiction or temptation than to resist it.
Yeah.
Way more easier.
Because what happens when you're trying to resist is that you're using your willpower.
Yes.
Right. And so long as you're already in an environment that sponsors that very action, right? The environment already has an influence over you, right? So whatever you're doing to resist means that you're exhausting your willpower. The more you're still in that same environment, which some people call willpower depletion, right? Because over time, you would have no willpower to fight anymore, right? And it makes a whole lot of sense, right? Because makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah. So it might take you days. It might take you days to resist.
Yeah.
If you're lucky.
You might win the first day.
Yeah. The second day, and the third day eventually fall.
You fall for it.
Why some people resist for a while and fall eventually?
Why? Because the threshold of willpower for individual differs. Right. It's just like our levels of discipline differ. So for some people, their willpower resistance or the ability to put their willpower to use might just last for 3 days, others for 1 week. But eventually, what it means is that just by resisting, you're already in the second stage
of the addiction to pornography. Now, the third stage have to do with the action, and the action could be actually consuming the porn, going to those porn sites. An action, which is also masturbation. It's also an action that is involved in this whole process, and all that. Anything that involves an action, an activity that a person has to do is the action in it. And then the final stage is the reward. The reward is being propagated by a neurotransmitter, dopamine, and some of other hormones and neurotransmitters as well. And then you have this feeling that only lasts for a moment. And afterwards, these four stages is actually what substantiates the behavior and makes you act on it again. Why? Because the brain doesn't care.
It's a cycle, right? It's a cycle. And the end result of the cycle is the dopamine hit, the experience, the reward, just like you said. And the moment you get the reward, you go back to stage one again, right? And it all starts with the environmental cues, right? Always exposing yourself to the triggers that when they get to accumulate eventually, if you're disciplined, all right, or if you do not like the act, you're not trying to resist, and you're making us know right now that by resisting, you're really in the second stage, right? But so long as you're in that environment, the environment is going to have an influence over you eventually. So you're going to yield to it. The third stage is the act itself, right, where you literally consume the porn, and then the dopamine hits, the reward.
Now, the reason this becomes an addiction is because the brain always tries to automate every single behavior. It tries to automate it quickly so it can learn new things. And the way it does that is by either a behavior that gives it a reward
Yeah.
or a behavior that is important. For instance, your name gets repeated often, and then your brain registers that this is important to us, so that the next time your name gets heard, you don't really have to involve your brain activity. You just respond immediately. So the reason you get a reward from this, your brain will automate it so that it's difficult for you to stop it. The brain doesn't really care if it's harming you. It's just that you got a reward from it. So as long as you get to the final stage of dopamine hit, the behavior will be automated to be repeated the next time. So this is just the stages of it. But in solution, in how you find a solution to an addiction like pornography, you should understand that this affects 5 different aspects of you. And this solution is also in these 5 different aspects. For instance, pornographic addiction affects your psychological health. Psychologically, it affects you. It affects you sociologically, your interaction with other people and your interaction with yourself. It's why people get depressed and all that. Then it affects you biologically. It's why after you get that dopamine hit, you find out that the next time it needs more heightened environmental content to create the same response. That is, sometimes you're looking at nude people and it doesn't move you anymore. It doesn't move you anymore because you've seen it, or you're looking for something worse, something more intense, something more explicit. Then you start consuming things that are weird, things that are perverse and all that. So it also affects you biologically. And also the solution, so you're looking at psychological solution, you're looking at sociological solution, you're looking at biological solution, you're also looking at for technological solutions, because technology exists that can help you fight pornography.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, at least. And this in looking at this technologically, you will also learn about consequences and all that. And then finally, for people who have an appeal and a taste for spiritual things, the solution for pornography also lies spiritually.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, but we might not necessarily discuss that because not every single person have an appeal for this. But psychologically, sociologically, biologically, and technologically, these are where the solutions lie. Now, talking about psychologically, the environmental cues in your mind that we discussed. One of the ways you can take care of pornography, one of the ways you can do it, like I said, is not just one of these ways fights pornography, but the 5 of them, or at least the 4 of them, is by understanding that it is almost impossible for you to consume sexual content if you're not exposed to one form of it in your environment or the other. So what you want to do is to take away the things in your environment that leads you to consuming sexual content, be it the music, be it pictures, literature, the things you see, the people you hang out with, be it any single thing, maybe just seeing, because for some people, you're just on Instagram and then you're going through things and then you see a lady on bikini, right? And then it leads you to a different lady on something else that is more revealing.
Eventually, what those things are called, I mean, a lot of people call it soft porn, because we have people that might not readily get themselves exposed to porn, literally. You get, but then when you go on TikTok, right, so-called TikTok models, Instagram models, right, they kind of dressing patterns right now that is eroding our society. You know, where ladies literally dress in a sexual appealing way, means that eventually, if you keep on exposing yourself to those kind of pictures, those kind of videos, right, your psychologically there's going to be a trigger, right? Because over time, what happens, just like you rightly said, is that the more you expose yourself to those kind of pictures, eventually your mind gets fed up with those kind of pictures.
It wants more.
Yes, it now becomes creative, means that it wants more, right? It wants more, it wants to see more. And eventually, because right now your brain, just like, and that's why you're explaining this from a psychological perspective, right? What happens with your brain? What's happening with your brain, right? So what happens is that your brain loves what it's seeing, right? And it triggers a feeling in your body, right? And over time, it wants to see more, right? It's done with that whatever that stuff is. It wants more, which will now eventually lead such a person, if they do not understand what is happening to them psychologically, right? Because we need to also let people understand the role that the brain plays. Maybe at some point we're going to have a different episode eventually to talk about the brain, because we don't understand that the brain can be for you or against you. You weaponize the brain.
Yes, literally, your body doesn't belong to you. Your body belongs to your brain.
Yes.
Your body belongs to your brain. It means if a surgery is going on in your head right now, I mean, if surgeons open up your head, There are parts of your brain that will touch and you start laughing and you move your arms up. You can't control it. This whole body and every action of it belongs to this thing.
Yeah.
Okay? So if and that's discussing biologically the solution is when we look at the brain and all that and how this can also help you. But psychologically, what you want to do as with the psychological solution is that you don't want to resist porn. You want to avoid pornography. You want to avoid it, not resist it. You need to understand that what weakness means is things that you cannot control.
Yeah.
And then you don't want to react a threat with something you cannot control. You already know that I'm vulnerable to this. So you don't want it to lead to a stage where you start resisting. You want to avoid it by removing it from your environment.
Yeah.
So what that means is you might not watch pornography for 4 days, 5 days for a week. But guess what? You listen to a song by some of those popular musicians that explicitly discusses male and female genitalia. It talks about sexual positions and all that. And you're listening to this thing. Come on, it's pornography. You can watch it, you can listen to it. It's sexual positions, it's sexual positions, it's sex, it's male genitalia, and they're also talking about male genitalia. It's the same thing. Just these are words, these are videos, these are pictures. You're just listening to the same thing. So the mind now wants to see, especially if you're a man, because more of men are moved by the thing they see. So they want to see these things they're hearing. They want to really see.
So when it has to do with the psychological effect that triggers the need for people to get themselves exposed to porn, right? They need to avoid, not resist.
Yes, you
right?
need to avoid,
not resist. You need to avoid, not resist.
And the way you do that is to take away the cues from your environment.
Literally. And it means that you have a responsibility.
Yeah.
Right? You have a responsibility. It's your job to ensure that you remove. And this is so important that people understand the importance of being responsible. Right? Because if you just let anyone expose you to these cues, to these triggers, right? You are the one that will live with the consequences. Right? And it's important you understand this. And if you do, it means that you should be taking responsibility. Do not just let people impose videos on you, right? Because what happens is right now you can be on Instagram, you can be online, right? And I call them suggestions, right? And you have the algorithm suggesting all, because people it's a business. Remember we said it's $1 billion, $100 billion, whatever. Now what happens is that they are paying for ads, right? So the algorithm would send it, and if you click it, what you're educating, you're training the algorithm to know that you love such cues, right? Such videos. So what that means is the algorithm will always introduce those ads to you. You understand? So you can retrain your algorithm by clicking no, right? Or saying no, I don't need this. Right? If you do that up to 3, 4, 5 times, the algorithm knows you do not want this. So, but the point is that it's your responsibility. You choose what you consume. You choose what you expose yourself to.
So what you now do in fighting pornography at this first stage is every single thing that exists in your environment, because algorithms don't just exist on social media or social platforms. Algorithms also exist on every single area of your exposure. So here, if you go to Instagram, open up your Instagram, the first things you see are the things that you currently like. If it's causing you harm, you can like the things that cause you harm. So you take them away. You tell the algorithm, you click those things and tell it to stop suggesting these things. And you refresh and click and tell it to stop suggesting these things to you, because you're trying to desexualize your mind, your psyche and all that.
Responsibility.
Then secondly, the music you listen to, because you're trying to help you. Like I said, if you really don't want the solution for this, I can't help you. You can keep struggling until you get tired of struggling. But the songs you listen to, you have to find out the songs and the artists that discusses explicit sexuality, content and all that, and stop listening to those things.
It's important for the sake, just for the sake of things that we know. We wouldn't call names for now. Right? We wouldn't call names for now. But you need to know that there are artists that you shouldn't be listening to. There are movies, talking about movies, right? I know we're talking about music, but there are movies that are literally explicit when it comes to sexuality. It's terrible. It's terrible. You finish watching those movies and most of them are seasonal movies. So it means, and you know how long seasonal movies can be. So by the time it takes you weeks or months of feeding consistently on the trend of this explicit sexual content, eventually something is triggered on your inside. Right? And remember, we're talking about the brain, right? Your brain loved what it saw, right? And for some reason, it just want to keep interacting with it.
Yes. Yes. So every single thing that exists in your environment that could cause sexual arousal for you, even if you don't notice it because it accumulates and eventually leads to resistance,
Yeah.
you should avoid them. Like I said, if you want to help you, if you don't want to help you, can keep struggling.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you're like a person. Imagine if you're not normal like every other person. If you're sick and you go to the hospital and you're seriously ill, that thing should be told not to consume
Yeah.
that normal people eat.
Eat.
So the fact you're being told don't listen to this artist, don't watch this kind of movies, is because you're addicted and you can't help you. If you really want to help you, you have to stop consuming some things and let your mind get whole again.
And I know what some of you might say. I can't stop. No, you can't. You can't. You have to take responsibility. When you dislike something, and what happens is that what you don't hate, you tolerate.
Yeah.
What you don't hate, you disallow.
Yes.
Right? Or you allow in your space.
Yeah.
Right? The question is, how much hate how much disgust do you have for this addiction?
Yeah.
Because if you're listening to this solution, it means you want it.
Yeah.
Right? It means you hate the experience. It means you hate the addiction. So this is for you, and I'm letting you know that you have what it takes. You have the power. You have what it takes to take responsibility to remove these triggers, these cues from your environment.
Yeah.
Your environment also talks about your phone. It also talks about your space. Listen, you must preserve your space. Right? You have the power to decide what you feed on, what you allow your eyes to see, what you allow your ears to hear, what you allow yourself to feel. You should be able to dictate the things that come into your space. You have that sole responsibility. No one will do it for you. No one will do it for you.
Yeah. So it's important that you understand that the four stages I mentioned, you can't fight addiction at the stage of resistance. You can't. I'm not saying it's most likely. I'm not saying you might try. You can't. It's impossible to fight addiction at resistance.
Yeah.
You can't fight resistance addiction at action.
Yeah.
You can't fight it at reward.
No, you can't fight a
The
reward.
only place you can fight addiction is at the environmental cues. There is
environmental
no other
cues.
place you can fight it at.
I
The
think
resistance
we need
might
to stay
take.
here for
Yeah.
a while, because just like you said, I've known this, but you saying it now makes it make a lot of sense,
Yeah.
right? You can't fight it at the second stage.
You can't fight it at any other
You can't
stage,
fight it at
except
any
the
other
environmental
stage.
cues.
Just the environmental cues.
Yes, you can't. You might resist for a week and eventually fall. You can resist for a month. You can resist for 4 months. People have resisted for long. The goal with addiction is not to interact with it a little. It's to avoid it entirely, even if it will go on in stages. But guess what? You might find it very difficult to resist when you're already there. But you can stop listening to a rubbish song that contaminates your mind.
Yeah.
It's easy to do that.
Yeah.
You can. This song is this.
I
You
know.
can tell Instagram to stop suggesting sexual content to you. It's easy. But when it has accumulated and it has gotten to a stage of resistance, you've lost the battle.
A lot of us are not aware on how powerful and the kind of effect that music has on us. Like we have no clue. We have no clue. And this might not be the time, but you need to realize that one of the biggest influence that you're not aware of that can dictate your life and create pattern for you is music.
Yeah.
Is music, right? The kind of music you expose yourself to, and eventually you literally go into depression.
Yeah.
Right. So, but I really want us to stay on this environment, because not this environment, on this first stage, because just like you rightly said, this is where you can deal with this porn addiction.
Yeah.
At this very first stage.
Yeah. Now, we might not be able to discuss other aspects of this. Like I said, there are five stages and 5 areas you should be dealing with addiction from.
Yeah.
But aside psychologically, there's just one very important other aspect that I'll just talk about one thing from me, because there are a whole lot of people that are struggling with this, and I really want people to be helped, and it's very easy for you to get help. That is when it has to do with technological. Now, I'm going to mention just one. There are lots of technology and applications that have been created to help people deal with porn.
Yeah.
And most people don't know that this exists.
Yeah.
But before giving you a name of an app, here's an instance. What happens if, I know you're addicted to pornography and all that, you can't stop and all that. What happens if every single time you visit a porn site, every single person on your WhatsApp, on your friend list, every single person gets a notification that you're watching porn? What happens? Do you think you still watch porn?
Yeah, because what that creates is an accountability at a more social level.
Yes.
Right? And I think this makes a lot of sense.
Yes. Nobody, or most people wouldn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
If by just going to a porn site, every single your mentors, your friends, if
Your
you have a loved one,
parents,
your
your
parents,
brothers,
they just get
siblings,
they just get a notification that
that you're important.
Michael is currently watching pornography on so and so. Michael, my son, what's going on? And the thing is, you won't. Now you're addicted, but the consequence of your addiction have been moved before the action or close to the start of the action. So it's not impossible for you to continue if you know the consequence that is attached to it, and this consequence is immediate. Because most times the reason why people consume porn is that the consequence is long term. So there are actually mobile applications that people have sat down and designed that does exactly this. Now, one of them is Covenant Eyes. Covenant Eyes is an application that you decide the people who get a notification if you consume any explicit or implicit sexual content. Like it sends it to them immediately. You can't do anything about it. If the moment you go to Play Store or Apple Store and install the app and you have it on your phone, if you visit it also have every other ways it could help you. But one of the outstanding features on it is that you visit any sites that have explicit content, it tells the people who are to hold you accountable that you're doing this. So that already alone helps you, and there are lots of testimonies.
And if you're wondering why should I do that, the sum of what this app is doing for you is accountability.
Yes.
Because if you have these addictions, right? If you have these addictions or weights, one of the tested effects, right, that can help you avoid or limit the level of impact that these addictions have on you is accountability.
Yes.
It's accountability. It's because we, just like you said, right? The second, third, final state means that it's already too late.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
So, but this app helps you literally. This app helps you literally to become accountable to people. People that I mean, by the time you want to literally make a call and say, I feel like watching porn, it's too late. I mean, you wouldn't do that, right? But just by downloading this app, right?
It sends a notification to people every single time you visit.
Yes. Right, you visit, and I think the fact that this app helps you or gives you the ability to choose the people that you want to be accountable to makes it more interesting.
Yeah, and there are lots of apps like this, but this is one of those the one of the top rated ones. So we might not be able to discuss other aspects like biological and sociological and the spiritual aspect. But just by doing these two things we mentioned, psychological and technological, fighting this psychological and technologically, you would have cut your addiction by at least 60%.
60%, that's amazing. That's
60%.
Now we are here for you, right? We're here for you. And like we said at the start of this podcast, that the solutions that we are proffering here are tested, right? Listen, the results of this is amazing, right? It's amazing. You need to trust it. You need to trust it. You need to yield to it. And most importantly, you need to understand that you have the sole responsibility to stop this, and you can. You can, right? And in our subsequent episode, right, we will be spending, because these solutions are something that we need to stay on. Because just like we say, a lot of times there's so much consequences out there. Just knowing how bad what you do is, it might not be enough to stop you or give you the ability to stop it. Do you understand? I mean, just talk about cigarette, right? They literally won't draw the impact of what cigarette can have on you on a pack, but it still does not stop people from buying it. The consequences is in front of you, but if you're addicted, you're addicted, right? So we're going to spend a lot of time, giving you these solutions, and we are taking our time. That's why we're not rushing it, right? If not, we would have literally given you the whole 5 solutions on this episode, right? On this very episode. But listen, it's why you need to stay connected, right, to these very podcasts, so that you would have the holistic picture and capture of what the solution has. So
thank you for tuning in today to listen to us once more. If you have questions and you're still struggling with any form of addiction or the other, we are not psychologists. You need to talk to an expert if your problem supersedes the solutions that we're offering you. But if you still want to reach us out, you can leave comments and we'll find a way to contact you. And thank you for listening. We'll see you again when we discuss something more relevant and important as a topic.
And if you know people that are addicted to porn, please share this to them. Do share this to them. You will be helping someone. Remember, addicts do not know how to help themselves. So do share this, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.